Welcome to episode 396 of the DFO Rundown, as always presented by Bet365. Get in the game. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use the promo code NATION when you play. I'm Jason Gregor alongside Frank Seravalli. And man, we have lots and lots to get to in the pod today. Of course, the JJ Peterka trade for Doan and Kesselring. The big news, a CBA. Frank broke the story about a new CBA that will be starting in 2026 with some significant changes. We'll go over the 8 Eastern playoff teams and what they're looking for here in the offseason and the draft, potentially more in free agency. And we'll have an announcement at the end of the pod that you probably want to listen to. So let's get right to it. Frankie, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired. Flew out to LA and back, a pair of back-to-back red eyes, a reverse red eye going there. Didn't get in until 5 a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, and I was back out last night. Do not recommend that for anyone's health and safety.
All right. Now, let's start with the JJ Peterka trade. This has been talked about for a long time. The Sabres are going to make the trade. They trade him straight up to Utah. He then signs a 5-year extension with Utah, 7.7 cap hit. Meanwhile, Michael Kesselring, right shot defenseman, goes to Buffalo along with young Doan. So they get a forward and Josh Doan, and they get a defenseman in Kesselring. And the Sabres, to me, like, they traded away the best player. You know, they're hoping that Kesselring becomes more. Obviously, they're hoping that maybe Doan becomes more. But, man, we've kind of heard this in Buffalo for a long time. It's just a team that, you know, you're trading away the most proven player again.
This one is tough to digest. It really is. I think if you're a Sabre fan, you've got a pit in your stomach. And if you are a Utah Mammoth fan, you are overjoyed because JJ Peterka fits your team like a glove. The goal-scoring winger that you've been looking for to fit right in with the core of your team at age 23. And the contract is pretty good for a team that's got loads of cap space for the next 5 years. So from the Buffalo perspective, it just feels so underwhelming because not just because of the players that they got in return. And I am a big Michael Kesselring fan, and I think that he's got some room to grow, but I also think that his ceiling is relatively low compared to Peterka or someone else. That maybe for me in sizing it up, I just think there were so many other interesting offers on the table that I'm just surprised that they went with this one.
Well, because I know a lot of people, I said, what am I missing? And they're like, well, Kesselring. I said, so I dug deep into Kesselring. He averaged the 6th most minutes per game at Buffalo defenseman last year. Now, when Marino and Durzi were out, he did play more early in the season. Valid. When they came back for the last 30-plus games, he did. He had penalty killed for the first 10 games of the year and then really didn't penalty kill afterwards. So the Sabres, to me, are hoping that he can get more of an opportunity in there. Now, they don't have many right defensemen. We all know that. So are you going to thrust him into just saying, hey, well, you're going to get the opportunity? Well, that's great, but it doesn't mean he's ready for the opportunity. You're not getting a proven, solidified top 4 defenseman. I know people, they're hoping he becomes that, and he might, but he's not that right now. And Doan's still in his entry-level deal, real hard worker, probably a third-line player, and there's nothing wrong with that.
He's already the same age as Peterka, though.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe he becomes more, but it's a big maybe. And so I'm curious, Frank, do you know what other offers they had on the table?
Yeah, well, like weeks and weeks ago, the Wild put Marco Rossi on the table straight up. Then they actually went back and added something to it. And that wasn't what the Sabres were looking for. They had been targeting, as part of this process, a right shot defenseman.
Yes.
I believe in the last 48 to 72 hours that the St. Louis Blues put Jordan Kyrou on the table. I don't know if it was straight up. I don't know what the deal looked like, but Jordan Kyrou was in play. I mean, there was another team that put 2 first-round picks and 2 roster players in the same deal for Peterka. I mean, there's no shortage of things for Kevyn Adams to sort through, and he landed on this one. So it's It's obviously going to be on him to see what the deliverance is on the other end of it. But it's a big bet. It really is, because as mentioned, Doan is not that young at 23 to not be a full-time NHL player. He spent half the year in the AHL last year. And Kesselring, as you mentioned, like, there's some really good elements to his game. And obviously Buffalo was craving a right shot guy, and maybe he's the stylistic fit. And you know what? Maybe part of the calculus is too that Kesselring is very likely to be a guy that's perfectly okay with signing in Buffalo. That's part of it that you have to consider. But let me just present an alternate viewpoint, because I feel like the return for Peterka is underwhelming. I know a lot of, just judging by my text messages last night after the deal went down, a lot of NHL GMs were surprised. But let me present you this alternate viewpoint. This is a text from a high-level NHL executive who sent it this morning and said, "That's fair market value for Peterka, in my opinion. Scoring wingers are a dime a dozen. Big, steady right shot D are a premium, especially those who are under manageable contracts. And Doan has third-line wing upside and plays like a guy that could be an important piece on a Stanley Cup team given how hard he plays. He works his ass off." So not everyone sees it uniformly. I just present that to give the fair and honest, here's exactly what the lay of the land is, but to me still feels really underwhelming.
Yeah, I don't know if I always agree with a dime a dozen to get scoring wingers. So I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think people are looking for guys who are legit top scoring wingers all the time. And there's not an over an abundance of them, right? You look at just at right wingers, which Peterka is, and he's 15th in goals. There's not a lot of guys who score more goals. Now he's only 23. How many of those guys are going to get better? We'll see. But I'm always a little cautious to just say, oh, anybody can go find a scoring winger. Now, I do agree that right shot defensemen are a premium. And, Kesselring's big. He has all the stuff that you think he's going to be, but this is still a projection trade. You're hoping he becomes someone that can kill penalties regularly, can play big minutes regularly. And now we'll see, right? Now, I guess the good news is he's going to be paired with Power or Dahlin, most likely. So, that's an advantage. You don't necessarily have to be the best defenseman in your first pair, and be a top pair guy to succeed there. And obviously, I guess that's what Buffalo's hoping. Now, you're saying cost effective. This is last year's 1.4. What's he gonna ask for next year? Right. $5-6 million if he's as good as you think he is. So again, that cost effectiveness kind of ends after 1 year.
This was a very difficult trade for the Buffalo Sabres. They did not want to make this trade by any, possible conclusion of all the conversations that they had around the league. I know that their owner was heavily involved, and they didn't, as a whole organization, philosophy-wise, they didn't want to trade Peterka, but this became inevitable, and I think the Sabres ended up seeing that and decided to make the move. I mean, I think you want to talk about another option. I think Noah Dobson was in the conversation at some point with the New York Islanders. Like, they had a whole swath of things to do. And I think part of it was Dobson wanted that big $11 million payday. I don't think he's going to get that, but I think that was the ask. So,
yeah.
I mean, look, you never really know till you're in the position. And some of this is hearsay. Some of it's innuendo, but man, this one was a big one.
Yeah. So I like it for Utah, and we'll see kind of where they go. They obviously want to make a splash, and they made a splash this offseason. Now, the big splash, Frank, was your story that you put out.
Wait, by the way, I just want to say real quickly on both teams, I don't think Utah's done. I think they want to continue to add. And the Sabres obviously aren't done because they've got to figure out Bowen Byram next. And I think he's probably going to be the next number one on my trade targets board.
All right. We get to the CBA news, and that there's going to, as early as Friday, we're recording this on Thursday, a new CBA that would kick in next September and would go through for 4 years. and it would have an 84-game regular season with only 4 preseason games, and players who have played 100 NHL games can play in a maximum of 2 preseason games. Player contracts, hey, they're listening. I've talked about this for a long time. Maximum of 7 years now for players, and with the team, and then 6 years. So right now it's 8 to retain a guy, and now it's going to go to 7 or 6 if he signs in the free agent market. Big one, I think, for a lot of people, a comprehensive playoff salary cap mechanism, effectively closing the LTIR loophole, similar to what the Florida Panthers used again this year with Tkachuk able, they even said it publicly. Hey, that's how we were able to get Seth Jones and Marchand. So I'm curious on how it's going to work, Frank. That to me is a very important one. Draft picks now across the board for 4 years. They will own the rights of a player instead of 2 years to go back in the draft. There are also no more deferred salaries. That wasn't around very long, but it's not going to last very long. Revenue split stays 50-50. The playoff bonus pool fund is going to double from previous amounts. Something you've talked about a lot, Frank. The emergency backup goalie, the e-bug position, is going to be established full-time in an organization. So, no more beer league guys or amateur players that are going to dress for a game and potentially get in. And then there's a landmark player benefit improvements, as well as you can't mandate player dress code. And we already know what the upper limit of the salary cap, 95.5 this coming season, 104, and then 113. So obviously we've talked about this for a while, Frank. It seems like both sides were on par with one another. They're going to announce this early, a full 15 months before it kicks in. Anything really stand out for you in this deal?
Yeah, I don't think you can possibly overstate how enormous getting this done is for the NHL, its continuity, its business operations, and for the game itself. You mentioned how far out we are right now from the CBA expiring. Like, this is unprecedented labor peace that we've got now until 2030. So it's a huge step forward because, previously all I've kind of ever known covering this league goes down to the wire in September. And then all of a sudden I'm standing out on a street corner in New York looking for a cell phone charger because I'm camping out covering an NHL lockout. And so really glad to not have to do that from a pure selfish perspective because it's all about me. But in all seriousness, I think what's really interesting about this deal is that how cleanly it came together. It honestly didn't take very long. They didn't really start in earnest until late March, early April. And I think there was a real small window of time where they kind of went back and forth and everyone threw what they wanted to accomplish on the table. And I think both sides were able to kind of very quickly cross off the things that were non-starters for them. And they were able to then get to work on the things that actually could be changed. And they took what was not a perfect CBA, but in the NHL's mind, made it tighter and cleaner. And from the players' mind, they didn't gain any real significant additional revenue, but with the cap continuing to increase, with 2 more teams likely to eventually enter the fold and more jobs, the players don't really have a big stomach for, digging in and saying, hey, you really got us on the last couple CBAs. It's our turn to win some back. It's not really how it's going to work. And it's definitely not how it's going to work under Gary Bettman's watch. So I think just hammering this out and getting it done is hugely important for the overall success of the game, to have not be talked about.
I would think there's a good chance this might be the last CBA that Bettman negotiates when you consider, it's another 5 years until it expires. We'll see.
I would say to that, by the way, yes. But if you think that he's going anywhere, my assumption would be...
No, I think it's going to be his choice.
Well, no. I think at some point, yes, he's going to make a decision to to step back, but I don't know if it's possible for him to quit it. So what I would project is him having some kind of commissioner emeritus status where he's aiding and assisting whoever the next commissioner is. And particularly when it comes to hammering out the next CBA, that he will still have some tentacles on it.
Yeah, potentially. I look at it. The only thing there's lots I like. I like shortening the preseason. If you're going to go an extra 2 regular season, I always chuckle. They're like, well, this is the way we could make it even for every division. I always laughed. I'm like, you just could have taken 2 games less against the other team in your conference, and then you'd still play 4 games in your own division. It was so easy. But anyway,
I think it probably has something to do with expansion though, too, and the numbers that are involved with that.
Yeah, but even then with expansion, once you expand, Frank, that even stuff that's going to last for 2 years, right? That's why
I'm not good enough at math to understand what the matrix would look like.
No, it's not going to work at all evenly. You're not going to be able to play everybody an even number of games once you add in one more team to each one. It's just not going to work. But so I don't mind that. The playoff mechanism, we've talked about it. It's a clear advantage. There's no question. You can say it's luck. There's luck involved. Matthew Tkachuk's injury. No one really talked about it with Florida because, they had such a good playoff, but they had a really good playoff because, again, they had a salary cap that was over. Now, it's all within the rules, but it's a rule that 3 of the last 5 years, you had teams winning the cup that had a clear increased salary cap over their opposition. And I think when the fine lines are that close, that can be a big difference. So I like that that's closed.
I don't think that's going to change all that much, though. Like, Matthew Tkachuk had a real injury. And
but if you have a salary, it's going to mean, though.
It's not going to work just like that. It's not going to be as simple as icing a lineup because you have to still allow that. Like, let's say let's play. So I had this conversation as I'm working through this with sources, and I was real hesitant to put any of the details in about what that playoff cap could look like and how they're going to close this loophole effectively, because let's just take it from a different perspective. And let's say the Panthers are a fringe playoff team and they really want to make it. Okay. If Matthew Tkachuk tears his adductor off the bone at 4 Nations, why should they not be allowed to go out and replace him to try and first make the playoffs? And then, so once they traded for this next replacement, why shouldn't they be able to use him in the playoffs?
Well, because then your salary cap is too high.
Okay. Well, I think there's going to be some kind of avenue that it's not wiggle room, but there's going to be some kind of cap. That's why I said in the description, a nod to acquisitions and how the cap functions, because what are you going to do? Tell that team and that player that they have to sit those guys out now?
Well, you have to be cap compliant, just like you have to be cap compliant in the regular season. That's all.
That's not the way it's going to work.
So what's it going to do then?
That's what I'm telling you. It's not simple and it's not cut and dry.
Okay. So, but it's going to eliminate something. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah, I agree. It will. Yeah. But I think the Panthers are a really poor example. Well, why also because Matthew Tkachuk could have been activated before the playoffs because of the Aaron Ekblad PED suspension, but he wasn't healthy enough to play.
Yeah, I don't discount that. All I'm saying is, if you have a roster that just says, "Hey, you can keep all your guys, but you might have to pick and choose who plays which game." That's all. Right? They're still on your team, right? To me, it's going to
be interesting to see. This is like some of these details that I'm fascinated to see because I was told very clearly in LA, it's not as simple as you think, and there's a lot that goes into it.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's that cut and dry, but all I know is if they're taking a step forward, they clearly recognize that it's been somewhat of an issue. It is. I don't think anyone can argue it's a benefit if you're able to ice a roster with significantly more cap hit than your opposition. We saw it for years, in the non-salary cap eras. The teams who spent more usually had more success.
Yeah.
It's just
it's not a secret.
Yeah, you get better players. So the only one I was a little surprised is that the players have now. I guess you're getting a playoff pool addition, which is nice, but that there was nothing about the expansion, and we know it's coming, and that's where the owners make huge money. right? That there was no part of that. That was the only thing I thought maybe the NHLPA might push for.
They did. I was told they made 2 attempts to get a share of the expansion fee money, and they were told pretty quickly that it was a non-starter.
Non-starter. Okay. Well, it'll be good. Short. The thing I'm most excited about, shorter preseason. 8 preseason games was like kill me now. It was awful. So it'll get quicker, and we walk and roll.
You know what? We've seen with lockouts and COVID that we don't need long training camps for NHL players.
No, they all train. They're in good, like they come to camp in great shape. This is not 30 years ago when guys used training camp for a month to get in shape. They come to camp in shape. And I know some people will say, well, it's going to be harder for players to showcase their ability to make the team. And I'm like, I disagree with that, because players who played well in the first 3 preseason games, when it was mainly junior players and AHL players, guess what? Then they played 2 games against a mainly NHL roster and they didn't look good. So it's like, all right, we're like, what are we doing here? And the truth of the matter is, Frank, there's only 3 or 4 guys who have a chance every year, maybe. And some years it's like 1 or 2 on a team to make the team. That's just a harsh fact.
Yeah. I can tell you, having covered many training camps, that I don't know that I've ever seen a team get it wrong, that they picked the wrong guy. Maybe there was a guy that they said, hey, we got salary cap limitations or contractual reasons. We're sending him to the minors to start the year and we're bringing him up. But it's not one of those things where routinely guys are getting cut or snubbed from a roster. If you're good enough, you're going to play. That's
totally agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why shorter games, better. Everybody gets up to speed. The vets can only play 2 games, which they like. I'm sure there's still the minimum you got to address in those games, and away you go. So that will come in. We should remind everyone, not this season, but now do you know, Frank, because they're going to announce it Friday, I wonder if they'll put in the 4 years for the draft, owning it starting this year.
That's going to start now. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
There are some elements, and I wasn't totally clear yet which ones are going to be enacted immediately and the other ones are going to kick in. Like, I think the contract term limits and stuff, because July 1 is right around the corner. That's not going to be instantaneous, for instance, but there are some things that they were talking about that they were going to put in place right away.
Yeah. Well, the draft is the one that makes the most sense. Why not put it in? It's, there's talk we might not even have one drafted player play in the NHL next year, which not necessarily a bad thing in my books. So we'll see. Now we'll get to Ty Yaremchuk, and then we're going to get to the Eastern teams and more. Ty, how you doing?
Good, boys. Ready to roll. It's a new edition of Buy or Sell, and it is brought to you by our friends at Bet365. Download the app today. Use the code NATION. Whatever the moment, whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. You guys talked a little trade off of the jump. So let me start with a trade, and let's tie in the draft as well. I think, Frank, we talked a lot about, hey, if Peterka goes, does a top 10 pick go back the other way? So let me ask you now, are you buying or selling on a team trading a top 10 pick in this year's draft? Frank?
I'm buying. I do think that it's dependent on the board, and there's been a lot of jockeying, a lot of calls being made to try and snuff out some information or suss out some information. So you never really know, and I think a lot of teams are pretty cagey about what their list might look like. And with that, I would say that there is a 75% chance that we see a top 10 pick moved. And it could be as simple as, moving back from 8 to 12 or whatever it looks like. But I do think that there's an appetite, and there's also an appetite for teams to potentially trade one of those picks and use it for a roster player.
I'm going to say I'm going to sell on it being a trade that involves a player. I could see somebody moving down, swapping picks, right? For instance, Anaheim and Boston go from 10 to 7 and something else is added to it, something like that. I could see, just using those 2 teams as an example, but I'm going to say, I'm going to sell on there being a Jeff Carter, Sean Couturier like trade at the draft.
Next one I got for you, Frank. You got 3 Penguins on your new trade targets board: Erik Karlsson, Brian Rust, and Rickard Rakell. Obviously, Karlsson is the highest on the board, but I want to ask you guys, who are you buying on as the most likely to be moved out of Pittsburgh? Because the Karlsson deal obviously is a little more complicated with retained salary likely having to be involved. Greg's out of Karlsson, Rust, and Rakell. Who are you buying on to get moved out of Pittsburgh?
Ooh, good question. The Carlson one, at $7 million or 7.5, I think there's much more of an appetite for teams to want to look at it. But I will say Rust.
Yeah, 33 years old, still a guy who seems like a pretty consistent, regular 25-plus goal guy. Frank?
Yeah, that'd be the guy that I would target. But I do think that there's a legit market for Rickard Rakell. He had a career year, and it's amazing because it was the first time in 7 seasons, I think, that he beat his goal and point total. So he had a good year. Rust has just delivered seemingly at every turn, and I think his contract is really reasonable given his level of production. And if Rakell stayed at that level of production, or you could sort of relatively guarantee that he'd be there, I think he'd be an easy add. But I do know that there are some teams talking about Karlsson, that if they could get him at 7 or 7.5, the careful part for Kyle Dubas with Erik Karlsson with the interest is don't overplay your hand. Got to just get him off the books, get something for him, because teams aren't going to be paying a big premium, in my view, for a guy that age, with that dip in production, with that contract.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to do the exercise. Like, he does only have 2 years left. Like, if Erik Karlsson was a free agent this summer, how much money does he get? Like, would he not get a 2x9 somewhere or a 2x8? Like, Pittsburgh maybe doesn't have to keep that much, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's a polarizing player.
Yeah. All right. From draft to trades to free agency, out of Frank, out of your top 10 and your top 50 free agents, here are the 8 that are remaining. It's Marner, Bennett, Marchand, Besser, Ekblad, Tavares, Taves, and Ehlers and Provorov. Taves and Duchesne are the 2 that have signed. So you got those 8 players. Who are you buying on is most likely to live up and outperform the contract that they get? I hope this makes sense, but basically I'm looking at and hearing a lot of the rumblings about how much some of these guys might get, and it's like, oh my God, is this going to be a silly season summer like back in that year when it was Lucic and Okposo and they all just turned out to be duds? So out of the top 8 remaining in Frank's top 50, who are you buying on to actually outperform their contract? Frank?
John Tavares.
Ooh.
I'm assuming that he's staying with the Leafs. I just think he's a really steady guy. He's figured out how his game needed to evolve, going from being a power forward who transported the puck a lot to becoming a net front player. And he scored a ton. And if he's in that 70, 75, 80 point range, and he's, let's just call it $5 million a year, I mean, I don't know how you could do much better than that in terms of surplus value.
Oh God, yeah. If he gets $5 million a year, the thing I like about that one is because it's not only the AAV might be low, but the term is low as well. So, to live out the contract, it's a lot easier when it's a short contract, which is why I might go with Brad Marchand. If Brad Marchand's going to come in for 2 years at $5 million, I think there's a chance that, because you look at that and say, hey, if he's a 60-point player, it's pretty good value. So I think the guys who have the shorter term definitely will have a better chance.
Jay, if Brad Marchand takes a 2-year deal, if Brad Marchand takes a 2-year deal, I'll pay off your mortgage.
Well, I was just going.
Well,
I'm just going. Well, I don't even have one though. So
you did mention that before. I'll pay off your car.
Good bet. So in the case, I was just going off of what it had for the AFP rankings in your article, where it had him at 2 years, and so I agree.
That was pre-playoffs.
Because if it's 4 years, then probably not. But John Tavares is a hard one because, man, we were hearing like, okay, he's going to be close to Brock Nelson at 7.5, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I could see that. But if you're talking like $5 million for John Tavares, that'd be an absolute steal. Like after overpaying guys for the last 8 years, now they're going to get a value contract. Unfortunately, it happens when the guy's later in his career, but still would be good.
My guess for Marchand is 3 times 8.
8?
Yes.
Oof.
All day long.
God. Like I know, like the thing about the Panthers, like they had the real utopian playoffs. Like so many guys had career playoffs on the best times. To match that again is going to be really hard. It's going to say that right now.
All right. Well, you had to have known this was coming. What's the flip side of asking who's going to outperform their contract and who are you buying on? Who are you selling on that list? Who's your biggest buyer beware remaining in Frank's top 10, Greg's?
Well, he's just out. I'm putting in Gavrikov. When I'm hearing $8 million in 7 or 8 years for defensive-minded defenseman, I don't think it's aging well.
I'm with you. I think he's a strong candidate. I would go with Mikael Granlund. He had a great year, 66 points, and really is a guy that is such a smart player, and he works and all those things. But he turns 34 next season in February. I just think he's got a high probability for anyone that's giving him some term that they're not going to love what that looks like in relatively short order.
Cool. Well, neither of those guys were in the top 10, so you both cheated on your last answers, but I shall allow it. That is a wrap.
But the only reason I did that is because some of the guys who signed were out, so somebody has to move up.
Well, not only that, but some of the guys in that 8 remaining are going to stay with their current team. So, Tyler, you should have picked a more current list, or should have ad-libbed.
I went June 18th.
Put together your own list.
Yeah, I went June 18th.
Your most recent list.
Yeah.
Hey, I can't be everything to anyone. I can do CBA breaking news. I can break a Peterka trade. I can break a whatever else. I can't I've been doing trade targets. I can't just materialize UFA boards out of the clear blue sky.
But there is a new one coming tomorrow on dailyfaceoff.com.
Actually, there's not. We changed it, and Matt Larkin is taking over UFA duties on Daily Faceoff.
All right. Well, then never mind. There you go, boys. That's a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Bet365.
All right. So now let's get to, because we've done we did the 60 non-playoff teams. We did the 8 teams in the West. So to make it fair and even, now we're going to focus on the 8 teams who made the playoffs in the East last year. And we'll just kind of go through from, top to bottom as far as winning and losing rounds. Let's start with the Canadiens, Frank. You know what? They got into the playoffs. They had a great stretch run in their last 10 games, going 7-1-2. And really that allowed them to get by Columbus and Detroit and get into the playoff spot. What do you make of the Habs and their offseason?
I think the Montreal Canadiens have been super aggressive. I think they've been targeting top 6 forwards to try and add to their group. They've been willing to deal from their positions of depth with both picks and prospects. And it's not to go crazy. You're not going to see them in free agency handing out 6, 7, or 8-year deals to 30-year-olds. That's not what the Montreal Canadiens are going to be doing. But they've been trying to find impact pieces that are on the younger end or in their prime to fit their team. And so they've kind of struck out to this point. I think kind of like St. Louis, like a team that's been in the mix on a lot of different things and wants to make something happen, just hasn't materialized. And so that doesn't mean that it will, but between now and free agency opening, or maybe even later in the summer, I think that you're going to see the Canadiens continue to try.
Well, I think they got to be looking for a right shot defenseman with some size. To me, that's kind of like Captain Obvious. And I know it's a short pool, but if there's a position I look at for them to upgrade, they got to upgrade the right side of their defense. Not obviously not their first defense. He's pretty decent, but after that, they're going to have to upgrade it.
Is that not David Reinbacher though? I know he's not ready, but
yeah,
number 5 overall pick from 2 years ago, 6'3", 210 pounds. I don't know that I'm blowing my brains out trying to go get a right shot defenseman and pay a huge price when I think I've got one in my pipeline in short order, that you're then going to create a blockage for him to even get to that spot. So I'm not doing it. That's not what I think their target is.
Okay. I just look, because you can sign some defensemen, right shot guys, for 2-year deals I would strongly consider it. If it's a shorter term deal to get a vet in there, because who do you got on? You've got basically 2 right shot defensemen right now, right? That's it. That I would look at to say, okay, these guys are locks. Lane Hudson, now he can play both. He shoots left though.
What about Logan Mailloux?
Yeah, again, no, you've really got Alex Carrier as a pure righty, right? That's it. So Lane Hudson, he can play both. Where do they want to play him? Maybe you move a lefty out, but I would try to bring in a righty. I just think it's if you want to take the next step, and you don't have to blow your brains out to do it, but that's something I would consider if I was Montreal.
I just think they've been focused on a forward. And to be honest, I'm super bullish on the Habs. I think they have such an enviable group of players, particularly on that power play. I mean, you mentioned Hudson, right? Mm-hmm. So you can go Hudson, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, Demidov, Suzuki, and you put them in really enviable positions.
But they also got Laine, who's pretty good power play player. That's really all he is a power play player.
But that's what made the playoffs exciting is they bumped him to the second unit and they were like, look, this is our power play of the future.
Yeah. So they just kind of play out the last year for him. So,
but it's the start this year is going to be key for the Habs, because if they don't get out of the blocks well, they might be in tough.
What do you think they're just gonna? What are you gonna do in goal? You think like Caden Primo? They got Primo, they got Doan. It's obviously Montembeault's their starter. What do you think they do with their backup?
So I think what they want to do is trade Caden Primo, or he's in a spot where he walks because eventually you'll have to go through waivers anyway. But they don't see him as the backup, I don't think. And Dobish, in a perfect world, they'd like to have him playing games in Laval. So
so they're going to maybe sign a veteran backup.
Yeah, I think that's what they're looking at, or trade for one.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of.
I think they're low key, I would call them, in the goalie market. They're not like one of the most hungry teams because they could make it work with what they've got, but they're looking.
Okay. We moved to the New Jersey Devils, who of course had the same 91 points as the Canadiens, just had a few more regulation wins. Didn't do much in the playoffs. They were obviously ravaged by injuries, though. So when you look at the Devils, and when you consider the key injuries they had going into the playoffs and then the ones they got in the playoffs, they do have, they don't have any big free agents. Bastian, I guess, Curtis Lazar, guys depth down the lineup, Jake Allen in goal. And it sounds like he's going to test the market. I'm hearing like $5 million maybe for him.
Yeah, he's the top free agent goalie this year.
But like they've got a lot of guys signed, Frank, and none of their UFAs are real big pressing ones. So what do you see the Devils doing? They've got about right now, they got a significant amount of cap space considering they have a lot of their top end roles filled.
By the way, Brian Dumoulin, one of their pending free agents, looking for 3 times 4. It's the new version of the salary cap and how we need to kind of readjust our minds to what the new realities are is going to shock some people, I think, on July 1. I think the New Jersey Devils need to get harder to play against up front.
Agreed.
Too difficult, too easy to pick through them. Not enough size and physicality up front. And that to me is like, you look at how heavy Florida is. You look at how heavy some of these other teams are that have had lots of playoff success. I just think the Devils are in a much different category, and they've got high-end talent and skill, but they need to marry that with some players that have some bite. And I'm not saying like go out and fight. I'm saying like guys that can play a physical style of hockey or aren't afraid to do it.
Yeah. No, it is the one thing I think they got a lot of smaller forwards. And so that's something that I would definitely look at. There's not a ton of those players, but that's what they had. That to me should be their main focus in the offseason, because they got most of their guys, their forward group, are the only guy who's in the final year of his deal who plays a significant role really is Paul Cotter. right? The rest of their guys are multi-year deals and some, multi-year deals. So that's where I'd look to tweak their offense.
So I'll tell you one guy stylistically, and the Canadiens have gotten some calls on him, but since we were just talking about them, he comes to mind immediately. They need a Josh Anderson type player.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Anderson, it's because, as the cap goes up, he's $5.5 million. He hasn't produced a lot offensively lately, but, he brings you some tenacity. And, I think he's much more palatable to look at and say it's 2 years left now at 5.5. I think his value, Frank, and interest around the league has probably increased because of the significant increase in the cap.
It's actually always been high. The Canadiens have rebuffed significant offers, massive packages for Josh Anderson because
massive, really?
Yeah, you can't get players like Josh Anderson.
Yeah, but his offense really hasn't been,
I agree with you. There's been some nights where he doesn't look good, but he's got a very unique skill set.
Yeah. I wonder I think the success of Florida and how they play and the guys they have, I think really benefits a guy like Josh Anderson. And people are like, God, we really got to get him. I bet you Montreal might be able to get more for him now than they ever could before.
I don't know. I think maybe 18 months ago, they had some pretty big packages on the table that they bypassed, and they still could get something significant, but I don't know if it's now more than ever.
Well, no, look at his last 4 seasons, man. He hasn't had more than 32 points.
Yeah.
Now he did score 21 and 19, but just, is not a playmaker, but he's physical and he's robust. And I could see Josh Anderson at the trade deadline, Frank, getting you a decent haul, because by then you're only paying him. You're going to go for 2 playoff runs, but you're really only going to have 1 year at 5.5. And who knows?
I think Josh Anderson is going to be helping the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs next year. So I don't think he's going anywhere.
I think they're staying. All right. Let's move ahead to, so the Devils are looking for somebody like a Josh Anderson. What about the Ottawa Senators? And I guess let's start with Claude Giroux.
Yeah, that's been a grind. I envision that scenario is not really all that different than Jamie Benn in Dallas, who I think is closing in on a short-term deal that's likely to come to fruition on Thursday. Or pick another vet that's been in a place. For Claude Giroux, it's his home. He's lived in Ottawa for a long time, and that's the place that he wants to be, and everyone knows it. Maybe not all that different than John Tavares. And so they're hoping that he's willing to take a hometown discount. And I think he's looking at his productivity and the cap space and saying, well, how about a fair deal? I don't need to break the bank, but just give me something that I can work with here that makes me feel like I'm not being taken advantage of. And that's the push and pull that I think a lot of guys have had this spring. But I think the other underlying factor here is, without a doubt, the Ottawa Senators have put in some kind of internal budget. I don't know what the number is, but I don't think the Sens are spending to the cap this year. And that part is going to be interesting to watch Steve Staios navigate.
Now, how much of an internal cap do you see the Senators having, Frank? Are you talking $90 million? What are you hearing as far as an internal cap?
I don't know. I said I don't know the number.
Well, I wonder if that raises an eyebrow for Sens fans or not. But now you don't have to spend to the cap all the time. If you have good players, there's no point overpaying new guys to come in. And you look at, lots of their guys are under contract for, David Perron's in the final year of his deal. He's an older guy. I don't think he's going to be in a position to get a big raise. Shane Pinto, is going to get a raise next year for sure. But they got Ridley Gregg on a pretty good deal. Nick Jensen I like, but now you're talking about maybe we have to readjust what defensemen are going to get. So maybe he does get a big increase. But overall, they got a lot of their big guys signed, right? So the cap's going up. And you know what? If Nick Jensen goes from 4-2 to 5-2, it's not like it's going to break the bank by any stretch. So they're in a good spot. Now, Claude Giroux scored 50 points last year. Is he looking for $5 million? Is he looking for $4 million? What do you think he's looking for?
Sorry, say that again.
Giroux, right? He scored 50 points last year. Like when you say fair market deal, what are we looking for? 4 million, 5 million?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm really not. I would hesitate to throw out a number.
Okay.
But I think they also probably need to add a defenseman too.
Oh God, they need a defenseman, Frank. And when you look at the Senators and hey, they made the playoffs, which is obviously something that hadn't happened in a while and was good news for them. I think they would the Sens would probably want to improve their power play a bit, but health was a factor at times. Like a lot of their key guys, if they can stay healthy, I like a lot of Ottawa's position players, but their backup goalie is the one thing. Anton Forsberg doesn't have a contract. And, they do have some, maybe Mad Sogard's ready, right? We did see Mara Lanen. So do you think they're just going to go with one of the younger guys as the backup rather than go out and get a veteran?
I think they need a vet.
As a third, like a number 3, just in case.
No, I don't think Sogard is up to the task.
What about Mara Lanen?
Sogard's his save percentage in the AHL last year was .858.
Yeah.
It was 800 in the NHL. He's got an .859 save percentage in 30 NHL games. That's not your backup.
Mara Lanen, though?
No, not yet. They're in the market for a backup goalie.
Yeah, because now, granted, it was only 12 games, but he played really well in those 12 games. So that's why I wonder if maybe they get like a veteran goalie, Frank, who they think is like a number 3, if they have to start him there, but then go up and down and not worry about losing him to waivers. Yeah. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning, who lost in 5 games to the Panthers. Pretty close series, despite being 5 games. They've always been pretty aggressive. Frank, do you expect them to be aggressive this offseason?
I do. I think the Lightning are one of the real wild cards. They were one that was following the Peterka situation really closely before he went to Utah. I think the tough part for Tampa is like, if you want to make a move to try and go get someone, who are you plucking off your roster?
Yeah.
Like who do you have? You have players of value, but those are core pieces. So who are you going to trade?
Well, it's like the only real, like Nick Perbix, right? He's 27 years of age. He's a right shot defenseman. Like if you're Nick Perbix's agent, Frank, I can't see how you don't at least test the waters. We've talked all about so many teams looking for right shot defensemen. He's 27. You can't get any younger, right? Like this is his opportunity. And I think Nick Perbix might be a prime candidate to get a big contract.
Yeah. I think he's a guy that they had considered potentially parting ways with. I think he'd be on the list of those guys that they'd move. But I think the part that I keep coming back to with Tampa is that it's a struggle to create a list. Kucherov, Point, Gensel, Hagel, Seravalli, Paul, Gord, who just re-signed. They're not going anywhere.
Bjorkstrand's in his last year.
Yeah, Bjorkstrand, I guess, would be a maybe, but they did give up a lot to get him. And then on the back end, Hedman, Chernak, Moser,
McDonough.
They're not going anywhere.
No.
And then Vasilevsky, where are you finding trade pieces and assets?
Yeah. Like Nick Perbix might have been their best one, but he's pending UFA in 4 days. So I'm very interested to see what they do. I think if they lose Perbix, they're obviously got to replace him. They'll need a right shot defenseman. But Luke Glendening, I think, his possession numbers, well, none of the possession numbers of anybody in the bottom 6 in Tampa were great, but he can win faceoffs and kill penalties. His right shot center. I'm sure someone will sign him if it's not Tampa, not for a lot. I don't think he's a big number by any stretch of the imagination, but Tampa Bay is they always we've seen the big trades they made, Sergachev, etc. So I could never rule them out, but I wonder if this is the summer where it's like a quiet summer for Tampa. My gut tells me no, but at some point they're going to have a quiet summer.
I mean, that might be by necessity, they don't want to, but they might have to.
No, they're still good. They still got a lot of good players, but
yep.
They're, they're just not as good as Florida right now. That's just the harsh truth. So,
well, who is?
Yeah, not many. Washington Capitals, Frank, had an unbelievable turnaround in the regular season. They had lots of guys scoring. They went to the triangle offense that really led to an increase in offense for them. Obviously, the big story was Ovechkin chasing the record, and he got it, and it was great. And they did win a round. So there's like not a huge amount of negatives, but I look at the Capitals and I'm kind of like, okay, lots of guys had a really good year. Can they repeat it, or do they have to be leery and say, we got to look to see what other moves we can make here potentially to augment our team?
Where would you start? Because I wouldn't do anything if I'm the Washington Capitals. Unless you have something that's presented to you, or you feel like you could get in the mix with a player that you absolutely love and is in the prime of his career and you think is going to help put your team over the top, I'm not doing anything. They got one more year of Ovi. And yes, part of what the Caps are going to be chasing this year is a team that had a ton of career years. Guys really produced and they scored with ease. And the steps that we saw Protas and McMichael take, and Strome had a career year, and Wilson had a career year, and Dubois bounced back, and Ovi, turned back the clock. Jacob Chikrin scored 20 goals on the back end. I'm looking at those things and I'm saying you got to go out and do that again. One, but two, I am in love with the Washington Capitals prospect pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
Why clog it up? Why put roadblocks in place so that you can't get these guys to the NHL and producing, which they will be again in relatively short order?
Yeah,
Andrew Crystal, Ilya Protas, Ryan Leonard is already a full-time NHL player. Like they are loaded with players.
Yes, they got a really good prospect pool. I agree.
Cole Hudson.
They do need to sign some forwards simply because, Lars Eller, Beauvillier, Mangiapane, Radish, they're all UFAs. Hendricks Lapierre is an RFA. So they got to get something done internally. They're not going to re-sign all of them. Like, I don't think they're bringing Lars Eller back. Mangiapane, I'm guessing, is going to test the market. Beauvillier, he had a great playoff for them, Frank. And I wonder if he's bounced around here a little bit. So, but he's a guy I think they would sign, Hendricks Lapierre. I don't think Taylor Radish costs a lot. So a lot of their stuff might just be trying to see if they get any of their pending UFAs in-house before July 1st.
Not sure.
Yeah, because and if not, they're just going to have to go and fill out, their third line, fourth line stuff and look for a fourth line center and different things like that. Nothing major, but they've got their goalies locked up. That their defense is pretty secure. So I'm with you.
I think the Caps are in an enviable spot. They're gonna still be competitive and still got a ton on the way. When you look at Chris Patrick and what comes next, it's like the Bill Armstrong. He's in the same spot that Bill Armstrong was last year in Utah. Don't bleep it up. You've got a great thing going. Just stick with the plan.
Yes, I would agree wholeheartedly. They don't need to make any big moves, and they get a lot of freedom in the LTIR, right? With Backstrom and Oshie coming off the books. So that'll help them in that sense. But I'm really kind of curious to see, what does Ovi have left? The emotional excitement of the record is gone now. He still has 900 goals. He's going to get to 900 goals, obviously. But I'm kind of curious to see what season he has.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Carolina Hurricanes, they went big game hunting. Are they going to try to go big game hunting again? And after Mitch Marner, is there any big games to hunt?
Without a doubt. They're in on everything. They're in on trade pieces. They're in on free agents. They've got so much cap space, $29.4 million for a team that has 12 forwards and 4 defensemen and 2 goalies locked up. It's actually more than that because Nikishin is going to be in the lineup next year. That's 5 defensemen. They are another team in a very enviable spot. They got more picks and depth after the flip for Rantanen. They can chase a Marner and even overpay if they wanted to, even though that's not Tom Dundon style, and I still just don't think that Marner is going there anyway. But I also am not expecting the Canes to take any foot off the gas when it comes to regular season or playoff success. Like, why aren't the Canes the favorite to be in the Eastern Conference Final again next year out of the Metro Division?
Yeah. What do you think they do? Are they going to let both Orlov and Burns go as free agents?
I think that they are maybe going to present something super low end to Burns to stay. I think Rod Brindamore loved having him around. I think Orlov will probably get more than they're willing to pay on the market.
Yeah. And of course, there's two teams left. You got the Toronto Maple Leafs. Everybody's following the Mitch Marner one. I think we can agree, Frank, he's not staying in Toronto.
Yep.
John Tavares, Max Pacioretty's a UFA. They've got Matthew Nyes is a big one. Nick Robertson's an interesting one. I know he's asked for a trade before, but
why is he interesting? He's like just a guy.
Yeah, well, he's interesting to see.
If he had a different last name, we would legitimately never talk about him. I'm just saying.
Well, he's shown you some skill. When I say interesting, I wonder, like, he's asked for a trade. Do they just not qualify him and let him go?
No, I'm not sure no, there's no reason to not qualify him.
Yeah, wow. Maybe you trade him because I'm just not sure. How long do you keep a player who doesn't want to be there, right? That's always my concern.
It's not that he doesn't want to be there; he just wants opportunity, which is understandable.
Well, maybe he'll get it if Marner's gone. Maybe he'll get it. Matthew Nyes, is his contract going to start higher than a 9?
You got to first answer for me how many years he's getting. Because if it's an 8-year deal, yes, he is. But I don't think that they can go. It's going to be north of 10 if they can go 8 years.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going that far. I think it's probably going to end up being a 5-year deal.
At 8.5?
I have to do the math on how many RFA and UFA years it would buy, but there's a sensible middle ground, I would probably think, that provides him some security and the Leafs some cost certainty for a bit. But if you start to stretch into buying many UFA years, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah. I was saying 5 years at 8.7. What do you think?
I think that's probably too high.
Too high? So even lower than 8.7? Yeah. That's
just
fair.
because Wyatt Johnson is a different player, obviously in Dallas, but has one additional 30-goal season and has playoff track record success. I think that if you're truly comparing the two players, I think what Nyes brings is more valuable. But I think on a statistical basis, it's really hard to make an argument that he deserves more than Wyatt Johnson.
Fair. And leaves us with the champs. And we're close now. I've said all along, I think Sam Bennett stays. So that leaves Ekblad and Marchand. Ekblad's been very vocal publicly, Frank. He wants to stay. But do you think he ends up staying? Or is it just too enticing?
It's not too enticing. I just think the Panthers are going to have to make a hard decision. And I think Bennett and Marchand meant so much to their playoff run, and that Seth Jones is the in-house replacement for Aaron Ekblad. And I have real concerns about how Ekblad will age, that I think the smart play is to let Ekblad walk and not get entangled in that contract.
And does Ekblad end up in LA if they lose Gavrikov?
Maybe, but I could see Ekblad in Toronto. I could see Ekblad. I don't know. I think Ekblad could fit a lot of places.
Yeah. So they're that's obviously their big decisions there in Florida. They're obviously in a pretty good spot when you're the 2-time defending champions. I don't think
could see Ekblad in Columbus. I think Columbus is going to spend for a defenseman.
Really? Eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you though, and that's a sour that could age poorly. I'd be leery of it for sure. Nate Schmidt, any chance? So if they lose Ekblad, do they retain Schmidt?
No, Schmidt's getting like probably a 3 to 4 year deal at like $3+ million.
$3+ million, yeah. So all right. Well, that wraps things up. We have the announcement. This will be the last rundown with Gregor and Seravalli. This 4.5 years, Frankie, that we've been doing this, and it's been a load of fun. I'll miss seeing your ugly mug. on a bi-weekly basis.
Likewise, it's definitely emotional for me. 396 episodes in, and I think we probably started at times like oil and water. And I have so much respect for you and the work that you put in, and we've become buddies. And two guys that we knew each other and obviously worked in the same world and orbit, but I didn't know you that well. And to get paired up with you and go through the process of getting to know you and your family, it's been extremely rewarding, and I'm actually really sad to see it go. So we've developed a strong listenership. We're really appreciative of the loyal people who are with us twice a week, that are downloading, that are streaming, whatever it is. You listen in your car, I get funny messages from family members, from friends, from people in the game that giggle or laugh at something that we say. And it means a lot that everyone's been along for the ride, and it's been a pleasure to be with you and Tyler, and Pat has done a great job producing that. I'm really going to miss it.
Yeah, tell me about it, man. It's been great. Even I get messages from your brother sometimes about Frank the Prick stories. It makes me laugh. So yeah. I'll probably miss those a lot from Nick. It was classic. But obviously your work ethic is I think it's pretty unmatched in the industry, and what you've done as an insider. And so definitely miss working with you. I know you and I get along great, and so I'm a big believer that there's always opportunities to reconnect at another time in the future. And doing the rundown with you has been an absolute blast. Obviously with Ty and Pat as well, but it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. We've had some great debates, and we'll still chirp each other on Twitter, and obviously we're still going to be talking to each other quite regularly. But the rundown, as we know it, will be different moving forward. So just wanted to thank you, Frank, for everything. I know when I reached out to you originally to say, hey, we should do something together, and you know what, you're like, all right. And it kind of went from there, and you're similar to me, and you just got to do something and see how it goes. And I think it went probably a lot better than either one of us expected it to be. And, thanks everybody who's listened, and it'll be fun to see kind of where you end up and what you do, but we'll be in touch for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate everything. It's been the best part about this is we have our disagreements or whatever, but none of us ever took it personally. And, we'd follow up on text messages, or I call you if I stepped over the line and say sorry or interrupted you too many times. But it's been a blast. So thanks to everyone.
No, it's been great. We'll watch for Shane Wright. We'll see how that goes. Awesome. Well, that final time, Gregor and Seravalli together here on the rundown, signing off as always from Bet365. Enjoy free agency, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.